Namaste and greetings. I, Reet Lath, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. Today marks the third day of Beyond Binaries Cohort 2, an online international summer school program, a one-month immersive online certificate training course. We welcome you to join us for an immersive journey that centers diverse queer narratives, mobilizes policymakers to challenge stereotypes, dismantle stigmas, and promote greater social acceptance and inclusion. This learning program is organized by IMPRI, Gender Impact Studies Center, and would be chaired by Professor Vibhuti Patel ji. This program also has an excellent panel of experts who will be sharing their expertise for the duration of the program. We're honored to have a distinguished panel of experts joining us for day 3, which includes Raj Mariwala ji, Director, Mariwala Health Initiative, MHI, Advocate Rohin Bhatt ji, non-binary queer rights activist, lawyer, and bioethicist. And lastly, Rituparna Borah ji, co-director Nazaria, a queer feminist resource group, New Delhi. The panel of convener comprises of Dr. Arjun Kumar ji, Director, IMPRI, and Dr. Simi Mehta ji, CEO and Editorial Director, IMPRI, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, Visiting Distinguished Professor, IMPRI, and Ms. Vidita Jha ji, Assistant Director, IMPRI. Proceeding further, I welcome all the participants to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and efforts into understanding the crucial role and intricate details of queer inclusive policies rooted in equality, dignity, and justice principles, while also helping us to bring together the practitioners and participants through this course for impactful policy research and action. We've also shared the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind perusal. Before we start today's session, I would like to remind the housekeeping announcements once again. Please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions on the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise. And lastly, refrain from making general comments in the question to save time. Now, without any further ado, let's start our program. It is my honor and privilege to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel ji to deliver her opening chair remarks. We welcome you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Reet, for introducing the course. And I would like to, first of all, express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Ms. Vidita Jha, and Ashtaba Jadeja, who have put in their hard work for this course. Today's moderator, Ms. Ritlat. I also welcome you and welcome Raj Mariwala ji, Advocate Rohin Bhatt ji, Rituparna Borah ji, and Harish Iyer ji, and esteemed participants. I would like to begin with a very important quote by In Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, and it goes like this. Some worlds are built on a fault line of pain, held up by nightmares. Don't lament when those worlds fall. Rage that they were built doomed in the first place. For some crimes, there are no fitting justice, only reparation. And the third quote is that every season is a season for us. So I think it is with this optimistic note, I would like to just briefly summarize what transpired in day 1 and day 2. Day 1 began with the presentation by Moulee ji, who emphasized LGBTQIA persons should be viewed as constituency of diverse groups coming together. He also said that queer family members are in each and every community, and contemporary politics, Indian political history, Indian queer movement bear witness to this fact. We cannot be in a denial mode with regards to political constituency of the queer community. And he also talked about the defining moments in LGBTQIA movement in 2003, when the government of Tamil Nadu accepted draft policy, suggested demanding horizontal reservation for trans and intersex persons. 2004, where transgender activist Priya filed petition that every transgender person be given a voter ID and ration card to 2006, where Kamla Jan was elected as a mayor of Katni town in central Indian state of Madhya Pradesh, and 2018 when Supreme Court of India repealed Section 377. After that, we had a very important, very moving testimony from Prince Manvinder Singh Gohil ji. In his daring and encouraging presentation, it kept the participants spellbound. He also stated, and I quote, that I have been first person in the royal family in the whole world to have come out as gay. In the normal families, there is tremendous amount of attachment between parents and children. Hence, it is difficult for them to come out. But in the royal family, children do not have that kind of attachment because they are raised by governesses. Emotional blackmail of queer children happens in all types of family. And parents also like resort to counseling in a way that, so what if you are gay? You can still get married to a girl of our choice, no? So this kind of homosocial behavior, which is our society encourages, that also has its own externalities. Manvinder shared the most painful personal experiences of growing up in Rajpipla, who had with the constant homophobia that he was encountering around him. He had a nervous breakdown. The parents also tried medical conversion, religious conversion, death threat, disowned from the property and inheritance, and how he rebuilt his life by making making new friends, new chosen family, and also establishing a powerful organization called Laksh, and the first person to start Garima Group, totally supported by the community and by the sympathizers. Ragamalika's presentation was about the role that media portrayal of LGBTQIA lives, how they are portrayed as a spectacle. And she promised that when she reaches the decision-making position in the newsroom, they would break that status quo and highlight the issues faced by intersectional vulnerabilities faced by marginalized communities. And she also, as a queer journalist, she said that we should be responsive to LGBTQIA plus community facing multiple marginalities. And it is not just a professional commitment, but it is for her, it is a personal commitment. And she also talked about the effort she made in making her project of inclusive newsrooms. The day two, we had a very interesting internal debate among the participants where personal testimonies and sharing of the research endeavors in queer studies were made by the participants. It gave a lot of energy and also facilitated bonding among the participants. Dr. Dhiren Borisar's presentation was a grounded presentation informed by intersectional perspective on queer cartographies of the desires in Delhi, and also provided vivid portrayal of different spaces such as cruising parks or queer nightlife, massage parlors, and the LGBT activist fora, which are there in Delhi, London, and New York, where he shared his personal experiences. And he also said that as a Dalit queer person, his journey has been very different from what we see in the Pride Parade. But still, solidarities are extremely important. Harish Ayerji's presentation, it was extremely enlightened talk on embracing equality, advancing LGBTQIA plus rights in professional landscape. It brought to the fore their humble and kind persona, because Harishji spoke on corporate culture informed by flavor of the season, vis-a-vis incorporation of gender queer concerns in everyday governance. He gave ample examples of how the marginalization, discrimination, or even exclusion of queer communities in the corporate life takes place at every level, at the time of entry, at the time of working there, and also the everyday experiences. If the manager doesn't use right pronoun, he said, that it erodes credibility of the organization. So use of inclusive language is very important. Be respectful of pronouns and tackle discrimination and harassment here and now. You can't postpone. This is not the issue that can wait. You have to immediately confront it. Now, today we have Mariwala ji, Dhiren Borisa ji, and Rituparna Borah ji, all of them equally active through their organization, the support they are providing to the queer causes, and also many of you must have seen their uh, uh, inputs in the LinkedIn and social media platforms. So over to you, Preeti.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a comprehensive overview of the course and for setting such a positive tone for today's deliberation. Now, I'm delighted to call upon Raj Mariwala ji, Director, Mariwala Health Initiative, to expand our knowledge on the topic, a shift from being queer-friendly to queer-affirmative, mental health and its intersection with marginalized communities.
Hi, everyone. I hope that I'm clear and audible. Okay, great. It's very good to be here. It's a bit intimidating to have to come after so many amazing speakers, and I'm very sad to have missed Dr. Borisa's talk. But anyway, my name is Raj. My pronouns are they and them. And because I'm not sure about the access needs of everyone who's participating today, while I did see the caption sign come on, I will share a description of myself. And the reason I do this is because people who are not blind in these situations take in a lot of visual information about each other, and you don't have to define it, you don't have to consent to it. So for those with visual impairments, we tend to give descriptors. So like I said, I'm Raj, I'm the director of MHI. I have short, mostly black but some white hair, and I'm wearing a blue shirt with a white collar. Now, I think I was called here to speak because I am the director of a mental health funding and advocacy organization in India called Mariwala Health Initiative, and our focus is to make mental health accessible to marginalized persons and communities. For example, LGBTQIA folk, those marginalized by caste, religion, disability, occupation, geography, etc. We currently partner with about 52 organizations in 22 states and 4 union territories. And we also do a bunch of advocacy work as well as training programs, mainly which tend to be around queer affirmative training or peer support. Now, coming to what I'm going to share with you today, I'm not a mental health professional or practitioner. So I'm going to be speaking from my position of lived experience, um, as well as someone who is neurodivergent, or if I have to step away from jargon, someone who lives with a learning disability and other mental health issues. Now, once I've said that, in terms of my own mental health access needs, I may have trouble looking directly at the camera, and I may take breaks to do Q&A, which would be interspersed with what I'm going to share with you all. And finally, in case I say things that may disturb or upset you, and in case you would like someone to talk to, the iCall helpline offers professional psychosocial support in 7 languages, and the number is 915-298-7821, or their email address is icall@tis.edu. Now, the topic that I was given to speak on today is the shift from queer-friendly to queer-affirmative mental health. And so I think before I even start off, I wonder whether we can do a little exercise, which is I'm going to ask you a question, and I would like you to type the responses in the chat box. There is absolutely no right or wrong answer. There are no embarrassing answers. So here it goes. What's the first word that pops into your head when I say mental health? And don't be afraid of literally writing the first word. Come on, folks. Okay, stigma, suicide. depression, stress, stereotypes, therapy, stress, depression. Depression and anxiety, anxiety. Great. There is a common thread in all of these. And you can continue to type, that's fine. But I think the main thing to consider here is that depression, anxiety, stress, therapy, stigma, all of these are very dominant and expert-led ideas around mental health, in the sense that who has access to them? Does everyone have access to them equally? Who has access to this language? And so that's our starting point, okay? But because I like to talk less and make people do more work, let's flip this a little bit, and let's actually get into the idea of queer friendly or queer affirmative, right? So I'm going to detail again an exercise for you. Also listen to my example, and then I'll ask you a question. Is someone talking or have a question? By the way, you can, ask me questions. Okay, there we go. Okay. Now, I want everyone to imagine a time 1,000 years in the future. You live in a country of 10 million people. 95% of the people in your country are homosexual. Most of them marry people of the same gender. Now, the average age of marriage is about 22 to 28, and most families have 1 or 2 children. Now, it is the state that covers the use of medical technology for childbearing. Offices also have parental leave, and that's taken care of and supported. Parents raise their children on storybooks that show love between Cinderella and Snow White. The 7 dwarves who live with each other are all gay. Of course, they are all gay. Otherwise, why would 7 dwarves live together, right? And they bring them up to become normal, healthy, homosexual adults. Religious leaders also say that homosexuality is normal, but that heterosexual behavior is sinful. There are laws punishing any kind of heterosexual behavior. Medical foundations, in fact, are working really hard on this problem and putting in a lot of money into research, which looks at finding a cure or eliminating the straight gene. Now, you, in this scenario, are a 31-year-old man or woman who has always been attracted to people of the opposite gender. And you've tried really hard to get rid of these feelings, but they're really intense. You're unable to find or figure out a way to cure this. And of course, in terms of your life, you work in an office that has an unwritten policy that is against hiring of people like you. In fact, most people in your office are married to others of the same gender. And while you are attracted to someone of the opposite gender, you have no way of telling them, you have no way of sharing this with your friends or colleagues. Because if you get caught, you may lose your job, you will lose friends. And part of this isolation, you've heard, there are reports out there that there are about 7% of people in your country are like you, straight people, but you've never met anyone like you. I mean, you think that there could be others. Maybe you have a straight dar, but they all have to be in the closet due to the fear of being found out. And in fact, really the only place that you see straight people is sometimes on like Netflix or Amazon Prime, and they're just funny, or like they go after their love interest like psychos. So now this is the scenario. The first question I want everyone to answer, and you can like start your camera and answer, or you can type in the chat box. Now reflect on this scenario. What are the challenges you would face in such a society? You would face depression, anxiety, stigma. Okay.
Can I just answer it? I'm sorry, I'm intervening.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it will be very hard. And since I've lived in the UK and in Australia and now in Pakistan, so when I compare the countries and the environments, it has become super hard, I think, for people who even it's a problem of even breathing. They can't even breathe properly. I don't want to vomit out the bad things here because of the religion, but um, in a society where I live, I think it's I mean, excuse my words, but it's like a hell actually, living living in a hell sort of a situation. So because it's very sad and unfortunate when we listen to stories around every day and the type of this Stone Age barbaric sense that has captured a lot of people. I mean, majority of people. There are usually people in minority who are the bad people, but it's very unfortunate to say that intolerance is getting at a super high rate in South Asian context, which is very sad. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Gohar. I'll read out some of the others. It's exclusion from the mainstream, the challenge of acceptance, alienation, the challenge of survival. I think Reet, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this. I think it also perpetuates a feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, which leads to a sense of loss of identity because you're trying to hide yourself so much. At the end of the day, you might yourself get confused about your own identity. Yeah, that's about it.
Great, thanks. So now contrast this to the questions, the first word that came into your mind, that previous exercise, and you'll see that, mental health is far bigger a canvas than, what we are often taught it is, the feeling of rejection. There are two more questions to this, and we'll go over them somewhat quickly. Based on this scenario, which social institutions would be barriers for you? And I think you all have already answered this, but what would your feelings, your emotions, your idea of self-worth be in such a scenario? Are people not feeling like chatting? Should I define this for you? Okay, I'll start. The reason I do this, okay, artificial forms of institution like marriage, perfect. Institutional barriers, marriage and family, yes. Marriage, laws, the world of work, very important.
I'm sorry, can I again intervene? I'm not very good with chatting, so I'm therefore speaking. If I've understood the question correctly, and if you're suggesting that we need to answer or responding to what sort of things should be done, if this is the question, I'm sorry if I have no. Okay.
No. See, based on the example that I give you, where you imagine that, you're a heterosexual living in a homosexual society, what are the social institutions that would be barriers? And what would be your feelings, your emotions, your self-worth in such a society?
Mhm. I think everywhere it'll be the problem because I mean at work, even in at home and in family basis things, it'll be a problem throughout. So it'll be like living in a world full of problems. And as somebody said earlier, the loss of identity is the biggest loss, I think, which should be responsible for lack of confidence. It just takes you the hope of life. So it'll be a problem everywhere, I suppose. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And yes, social life, friends, state, religion. Now, the reason I did these two exercises one after another is because I want to really drive home the point that distress and the life stressors we face are socially located. They are introduced by negative social attitudes and rules, and not because something was wrong with you. I mean, once we did this exercise, we learned that when the environment around us became negative, became oppressive, suddenly you found that being you, being heterosexual, became a disadvantage, right? And I think that's the very first point that, I want to get into when it comes to talking about mental health and whether it's queer friendly, queer affirmative, etc. That is, who is the system built for? What is the gaze or the approach of the mental health system, and where do the fault lines lie? Now, we've been socialized and we have been taught that there are two genders, that bodies are of two types only, and those two types correspond faultlessly to two genders, that there is only one sexuality, and that sexual relations can happen only between these two genders, and that too in many societies only within the institution of a monogamous marriage for the purpose of procreation. Now, this itself is the root of the problem when we look at mental health. Because, of course, what exists in nature are many different types of bodies, many variations, multiple ways of experiencing gender and sexuality. The problem is that the dominant construct is the one that is most visible, most permitted, and of course, most catered to. And it lies in the social. Now, I'll give you two examples. Just a few months ago, the Supreme Court went on record based on the testimonies of doctors, okay, medical doctors are saying this. And the Supreme Court ruled against the plea of a 44-year-old single woman who wanted surrogacy. And because the doctors said so, the court also said so. The institution of marriage must be protected and preserved in the country. And so it cannot follow the model of Western countries where children are born outside of marriage. So, and the court literally said, you cannot have everything in life. Your client preferred to remain single. We are concerned about society and the institution of marriage. Right? Now, you contrast this with both medical establishments and courts saying that marital rape is not an offense. Or, for example, the two-finger test when sexual assault is concerned. Now, these are all upholding social dominant norms, right? Moving back to heterosexuality and mental health, what's the problem, right? A norm is a norm. So what if the mainstream, the majority is cis heterosexuality? The problem is that everything, as you did in that exercise, education, finding friends, love, peers, community, getting married, making family, are all reflected, recognized by social, economic, legal, and political systems, but also mental health systems. In fact, mental health systems are designed keeping this in mind. And our medical textbooks are also designed like this. In fact, in the Indian setting, this default can be explained a little further. It's not just cis heterosexual. The Indian setting, the default is urban, upper caste, white collar worker, cis heterosexual, able bodied Hindu cis man. That's the default. And any sexuality, gender, ability outside this is invisible. It's a phase, it's a special circumstance, which could be minority, for example, or in mental health, more commonly, people say, how will you engage with XYZ minority? Now, it is precisely this omission or this afterthought in the gaze, which is incomplete, which is harmful, and which upholds very oppressive ideas of normal. Okay? And this is why there is a violent history in the legacy of mental health with LGBTQIA persons, because mental health, like all other medical disciplines, has colluded with social norms to uphold cis heteronormativity, to uphold the gender body binary. And those who fell outside of this were considered deviant and requiring cure. Now, whether it was gay men, trans women, hijra communities, they've been criminalized, incarcerated, and of course, because of mental health, faced cure through electroconvulsive therapy, other aversive therapies. While mental health started this off, I want everyone to remember that other medical disciplines learnt from mental health. Okay, there were surgical interventions after all of these, which included hysterectomy, ovarectomy, clitoridectomy, castration, and more things, right? To cure homosexuality. And of course, this continues to take place with regard to intersex folks. Now, what's happened in the last, say, 20, 30 years? Mental health Bibles have declassified homosexuality in 1973 and 1990. But there are still variations here and there of pathologization around queer, trans, and especially intersex identities. Now, if we look at the Indian context, what's happened? In 2014, the Indian Psychiatric Society president, 2014, okay, that's 10 years ago, she said that homosexuality was unnatural and treatment was available. Now, things changed after the Supreme Court was considering reading down Section 377. So 2 months before the Section 377 judgment, the Indian Psychiatric Society announced its official stance on homosexuality and told its members to stop considering homosexuality as an illness. Now, if you look at the statement, it says this, but do you know how it says it? The IPS precedent says it is normal because some individuals are just not cut out to be heterosexuals. That's what the statement says. That's the official statement. Okay. Now, looking at this statement, it should come as no surprise that violations, of course, continue for queer trans people, because the default, the gaze, is heterosexual. Because he said some people are not cut out to be heterosexual. Does that put the idea of like a deficit on the individual for not being cut out to be heterosexual? Yes. And this is continuing to happen despite the Mental Health Care Act, which mandates non-discrimination. The National Health Policy in 2017 says that the social determinants of health, such as economic stability, access to education, etc., are all crucial. This will continue to happen despite the laws, simply because such an outlook, what the IPS president said. By the way, he said it after an LGBTQ task force was put into place in the IPS. This will continue because this type of outlook fails to challenge pathological representations of LGBTQIA lives. It fails to take accountability for the violence that mental health has done, and it fails to make amends for that violence. Now, if we have to counter this legacy of violence and discrimination in mental health, this structural violence has to be challenged, right? Now, if we are to challenge this structural violence, the first point is that we must be willing to acknowledge the discrimination that is built in, that is embedded into health systems. And then at a larger level, if we look at it, health curricula, in processes, in institutions, in departments, but of course also interpersonally and individually. So if we are to be queer affirmative, and there is a reason for this, I'll go into it later. The first barrier that we have to consider lies in the understanding of gender sexuality itself. Rather than saying everyone is heterosexual, except for these outliers, the starting point has to be that bodies, genders, and sexualities are diverse. we have to have the unlearning and equipping ourselves with knowledge about genders and sexualities beyond the binary, because the real barrier to queer affirmativeness is our narrow dominant approach, and that helps to institutionalize prejudice and discrimination, right? So now we've established there's history and legacy of violence, we have to do work to challenge it, etc. What would happen if we remained queer friendly, right? The IPS has said that it's normal. Homosexuality is normal. Now, last year, there were court cases on LGBT marriage. Now, the task force, the IPS task force, soon, I think around the time of the court deliberations happening, they put out another statement. They said that LGBT people should be given rights as citizens, as any normal citizens of this country. And they said that, right to marry, etc., etc. The end of the statement said that they can also, like other people, have the right to adopt. However, that included an instruction for LGBTQIA people. What was the instruction? To bring up their children in a gender-neutral, unbiased environment. Now, what does that mean? Does the IPS say that to cis heterosexual parents, or do cis heterosexual parents bring up their kids in a gender-neutral, unbiased environment? Now, I know that I'm not going to ask you to answer this. I know you know what the answer to this is. The reason I say that this is the difference between queer friendliness and queer affirmativeness is because if we are queer friendly, we will not look at oppressors. We will not look at oppression. The gaze is only on the margins as something different. If we remain queer friendly, we will be sustaining inequality. Inequality doesn't continue in a vacuum. It is sustained. There are forces that sustain it. And to do this, we must remember that the normal is simply the normative. And if we are to be queer affirmative, we have to turn the gaze towards oppressive forces first that are complicit in creating and maintaining the inequality. Now, why is this important? Queer friendly, queer affirmative. Won't queer friendly mental health professionals be just as okay? No, they won't, because if you are queer friendly, you will be neutral and objective. You will look at a queer client who walks in, who maybe has problems finding love, and say, and give the same kind of responses that you would give to a heterosexual person. But think back to the inversion exercise that I did with y'all at the beginning. Would it be as easy to find love? No, it is not. So if you are unable to be affirmative, you are not going to be able to do that extra to account for the gap that these systems of power have created, right? We have to realize that the normative is unequal. And so if we don't recognize the hierarchies and differences and assume a false sameness, we only end up reinforcing the power systems that cause the marginalization in the first place. And that is why queer affirmative mental health is important, because affirmative means doing the extra in order to account for social inequalities, right? So how is this possible? How do we do this? I mean, let's get practical, right? How do we become affirmative? First is we'll have to unlearn that gaze, that knowledge. And how do you equip yourself with it? The answer is you have to learn from lived experience, from people on the margins. And it's not that this material isn't available. Knowledge from the margins has always been there. It just hasn't been given the same legitimacy as scientific objectivity, scientific neutrality. Now, a service that is queer friendly may know everything about the whole acronym LGBTQIA+++. but will not take into account the history of erasure and marginalization that LGBTQIA communities will have faced. When we are working with LGBTQIA clients, or when we are thinking about mental health for LGBTQIA folks, we will have to unlearn biases, and we will have to recognize our own accountability in historical pathologization. Otherwise, mental health is not equipped to respond to the needs of LGBTQIA folks, because one needs to recognize the issues and stressors that are inherent in living on the margins of cis heterosexuality. And now remember, a bunch of you did write about the stressors, right, when we did the exercise. I mean, you will face different types of familial violence, different types of discrimination and violence in public places and in institutions, as well as struggles with self-acceptance. You may be in a minority of one in your family. Now, these combinations have very significant mental health impact. And if we are to be better at mental health, we will have to draw on knowledge generated by queer trans folks, drawn from lives, politics, and struggles based on lived experiences and felt realities. Now, to put this into practice entails creating spaces, but also curricula that center these lived experience. Now, why is this important? And I'll just give you an example. We partnered with an organization to change curricula in some colleges and schools. And because it was, not queer trans affirmative and well-established organization, I took a look at all the materials that they'd sent, but it was very clear that they had not consulted a single queer or trans person. And that caused all sorts of issues, including writing things like hijras do only sex work and begging. And when I asked them, have you consulted any queer trans people before writing this? I was told that I have the person said that I have lesbian friends. Now that's just not enough. To be queer affirmative, you have to foreground queer trans knowledge, expertise, and lives. If you are not reflexive about this, you will continue to use heterosexism and cis heterosexuality as the starting point. And then that becomes not just a legal responsibility by the laws of this land, but also an ethical responsibility. You have to change mental health practice at multiple levels, in civil society, in conceptualization, in modality, in accessibility, and in design. I believe I have like 5 minutes left. So I know that I've tried to cover a lot. I also want to kind of flip the mirror as a person who works on disabilities and talk about what happened when the DSM, when the mental health Bibles removed homosexuality. Now, it took a lot of advocacy from LGBTQ movements to make that happen. But because there was such a narrow focus on removing that, something happened. Essentially, what LGBTQ movements ended up doing was they fought to be called normal. And I think that is not what I would envision, at least, as queer trans affirmative. The idea is then, if you are queer trans affirmative, to challenge the pathologization of distress, the medicalization of distress. And so I think that's the promise of being queer or trans affirmative in mental health, in civil society, in development narratives, because it is important to use principles of anti-oppressive mental health work to apply to other types of marginalizations. And it is very important because none of us we don't lead single issue lives. I'm sure it's a quote that you all have heard very often. But that is important simply because there are trans Adivasi people, there are queer Dalit people, there are queer Muslim people. And what would it mean then for one to be affirmative only of one facet of someone's identity? So the idea then, of course, for queer affirmative work is to question dominant narratives. And of course, queer transness is one of the entry points into this, and how to use knowledge to disrupt systems of power. There is transformative potential of a queer affirmative lens when it comes to all historically marginalized communities. Because, and this is important, because a systems improvement is necessary. And yes, not everyone is queer, trans, disabled, but decentering this type of cis heteronormative, ableist, upper caste gaze is better for everyone. And I'll kind of stop here, or take questions. I know that I'm supposed to keep some time for questions, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Rajji. We're truly grateful for your valuable time. Your expertise truly deepened our understanding of the subject matter and brought a lot of things into perspective for all of us. Thank you so much. Your thought-provoking insights were truly compelling. Now, the floor is open for questions from the audience. You can raise your hands or type in the Q&A box. Meanwhile, I request our chair for the event, Professor Vibhuti Patel-ji, to add her comments on the session.
Yeah, I think I found it very, very important. It touched both head and heart of us. And my only question is that much is said about the Mental Health Act 2017 in its praise. What do you think? Is it trans affirmative or trans friendly or queer friendly? And for all the marginalized people, to what extent is it making quantum leap in the earlier biomedical approach? And
that's such a great question. I think the Mental Health Care Act 2017 has some silver linings, but also some issues. I think the two big things are the non-discrimination on the basis of gender, sexuality, caste. And the other big one is that everyone has a right to mental health, a legally enforced right. Now, beyond that, there are no specific instructions on mental health and marginalization, right? So that's a problem. And looking at some of the different kind of, I think, facets of the act, if we take disability rights, for example, while the Mental Health Care Act does draw on the CRPD, which is, I'll put a link later on what the CRPD is. It does draw on the CRPD. It's not fully compliant with CRPD, which means that one can go to court and incarcerate someone else on the basis of mental illness. Now, I think that can be a problem, although it has been an improvement on previous mental health laws. There are things such as advance directive and nominated representative, which, I'll share a paper with you. There are some interesting ways in which, at least in terms of a queer trans gaze, you can bypass the natal family and the discrimination or violence that comes from the natal family and nominate people who may be chosen family when it comes to mental health. And I'll share that. But yeah, I think it has both good things and bad. Unfortunately, there's no real specificity, although there are some ways in which to, I think, ensure accountability where mental health structures are concerned if the government truly implements the act, which is not happening.
But at least for the first time, we have a union budget allocating 750 crores, at least since 2020. So that much is the change that at least there are funds, functions, and functionaries, and IMHANS as a nodal institute. Not many states are sending proposals, but still it has begun. The process has begun. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? So I actually wanted to build on what Vibhuti ma'am was saying, which is that like in the new laws and the bills that are coming out that are replacing the IPC, CRPC, and the Evidence Act, there is a claim that it is more gender neutral, it is more being more aware of the thing. But when we see it in actuality, the only thing that it is actually doing is just using gender neutral terms and not a very drastic change. So I just wanted to know your opinion on it.
I mean, yeah, that's the problem, right? If we just take a neutral and if we say, okay, yeah, now gender neutral, our gaze is still very much the dominant one. We are not taking into account all the institutions of power. We are not taking into account structural oppression. So in that sense, it's just cosmetic, unfortunately.
And it also claims to be decolonial, you know, that whatever colonial legacy of the British rule that we have, that is
Yeah,
also.
that is a whole other kettle of fish. But I do also believe that a queer affirmative approach has potential to be decolonial, and not in the sense of, unfortunately, in India, it's become a very laden term, which essentially took into account, I think, only the British, when we know that colonization is far more than just the British.
Yeah.
But I think different ways of knowing, different ways of having knowledge is decolonial, and that would be very much part of queering and queer affirmativeness.
Right. Thank you so much. Seeing no other questions and looking at the time constraints, we will be concluding the session. So lastly, I would really like to thank Raji for the way you articulated such complex ideas in such a simple way, and you put things into perspective and made it so engaging for all of us. It was truly a pleasure to have had the opportunity to learn from you. Thank you so much. We hope to have the privilege to have you as our guest again down the road. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I'll share some resources now
Yeah.
in the chat, which includes a manual on allyship.
Thank you so much. Now, it is my privilege to invite Advocate Rohin Bhatt ji, non-binary queer rights activist, lawyer, and bioethicist, to deliver a keynote address on Can Queer Liberation Be Achieved Solely Through the Law?
Well, thank you so much. That is definitely a tough act to follow, I must say. Unlike Raj, my session is not as interactive, or I will try to make it as interesting as theirs was. Broadly, I will divide today's 60 minutes into 3 parts. The first part, we'll talk about power within the queer movement. The second part, we'll talk about the law and its intersections with queerness. And the final part, we'll talk about what is happening in India today and juxtapose queer rights in the broader scheme of political and social milieu that we find ourselves faced with. Let's go back to October the 17th, 2022. The day has now become infamous as the day that the judgment in Suprio versus Union of India came out. There were 2 things that happened. I think one was a deep sense of disappointment with the courts, with the way the judgments had come out. But at the same time, I think there was also a lot of disaffection within the movement as to how the case had proceeded. A lot of people within the community felt that the idea of taking the case to the Supreme Court without consultations, without speaking to the broader community, was improper. That has kind of manifested itself in the way a lot of other petitions have come to be filed, not just within the queer movement, but also generally. So let's come back to present day and look at how we cannot repeat those mistakes. Like any other society or like any other set of people, the queer community is not a monolith. There are structures of inequality that exist within the movement. which are expounded perhaps by the profound inadequacy of our social welfare infrastructure, as well as a lot of other socio-economic factors, lack of healthcare, inefficient unemployment, workplace safety, health guarantees, protections in terms of caste, class, gender. And in this backdrop, how do we ensure as a democracy, assuming that we are still one, that we create a movement that is truly inclusive? How do we kind of balance the needs of the well-off and the needs of the poor within the same community? And how do we shape government policy through the law? Since 2014, perhaps slightly before that, democracy has kind of acquired this meaning where policy making or legislation follows the will of the majority. And as a result, the trust in our institutions, the trust in our systems of checks and balances has kind of faltered. It's at a historic low. Everybody from parliamentarians to the judges of the Supreme Court acknowledge that. But so much of the scholarship that has come out in the recent times has kind of not engaged effectively with how to kind of analyze the past decade, which has had milestones for queer mobilization, but also at the same time brought out fault lines within our movement for the right reasons, some of them. So, let's start with 2014, because that's what I want to focus today's lecture on. We had the Nalsa judgment coming on. Subsequently, we had in 2018 Navtej Singh Johar. Post that, in 2019, we had the Trans Act. In between, in early 2023, we had the Telangana Eunuchs Act stuck down in Vijayanta Vasanta Moulee versus State of Telangana. And finally, the latest one that we have is Supriyo Chakraborty. These are the broad, quote-unquote, queer rights cases that we've seen. There have been wins, there have been losses, but one thing that has been evident, whether it is wins or losses, is that queer experiences are peripheral to the crisis of constitutionalism that India is faced with today. And so how do we negotiate policy making when, say, you have a trans welfare board at the center, which consists of cis het women who have openly been Islamophobic, who have openly been transphobic? How do we negotiate advocacy for our rights in those systems? These are the questions that the movement is broadly faced with today. And we do not have answers inter alia amongst, for reasons that there has not been, as I see it, enough conversation within the movement. Part of the reason is that lawyers, and I count myself amongst them, have contributed to the judicialization of the movement. Since Navtej, as I see it, the movement has devoted significant resources to getting wins inside the courts. We have fantastic organizations working on the ground. We have fantastic organizations in the advocacy space, but the attention kind of has been towards getting judicial victories. And that perhaps goes back to the crisis of constitutionalism that we are faced with today. Why is that? It is because our democracy is failing. Our democracy is failing. Our legislators are not listening to us. And exactly before 2 months, and let's go back now again. So I want to do this kind of ping pong structure to this talk where we go back to how things were prior to 2014 and then come back to today. Now, 2 months before Modi comes to power, you have the Nalsa judgment, right? Where there's a slew of directions passed that has included everything from right to self-identification of gender, provision for legal recognition of transgender persons as a SC, BC, or socially and economically backward class for the purposes of reservations. And at the same time, when Nalsa is hailed as a liberal judgment, we must look within our movement where people have said that Nalsa means nothing to them. Somebody like Santa Khurai, a queer rights activist from the Northeast, says, look, Nalsa is good, but Nalsa does not talk about my identity as a Nupi Manabi person, right? Because Nalsa only talks of Hijras, Kothis, Aravanis, Jogtas, Jogapas, and other third gender identities, as it puts it. And so even Nalsa in its core was exclusive. So when we talk about judgments as inclusive or exclusive, or when we talk about the law as an inclusive or an exclusive tool, we must recognize that law is a double-edged sword. It is a tool for fighting oppression, but at the same time, it is a tool for oppression as well. Now, similarly, we come back to what happens with these kind of symbolic harms that come through judicial victories, right? And ask ourselves a question as to why queer rights are perhaps not as vehemently under attack in India by the right as they are everywhere around the world. And the part of the answer, I guess, lies in the nature of the demands that we have made historically and as we continue to make as a movement towards the state. Since 1990s, when the first petition was filed in the Delhi High Court by the AIDS Bhedbhav Virodhi Andolan, to today, we have 3 decades of activism that until Naftaj was solely focused on decriminalization. Initially, though, it was given a color of HIV/AIDS activism. It became about love in a post-Nalsa stage, where people started openly coming back, right? After Suresh Kumar Koshal, you had pride parades organized around the country, saying with the sole theme of no going back. Suresh Kumar Koshal had gone back on the Nas Foundation verdict and recriminalized sodomy. So the theme of no going back became a reverberation between pride parades across the country. And because the conversations had broken down, because there was a deep distrust within the movement, for the right reasons, let me make it very clear that I do not want to for a moment, take away from the fact that there has been active disenfranchisement within the movement, in parts by judicialization, where lawyers have ignored grassroots activists, lawyers have ignored people who've been working on the side. So we did not see a similar kind of pushback towards the judgment. Indeed, people within the movement who had been parts of the movement said that perhaps the judgment was right. And so, when we talked about decriminalization, we did not speak about the Eunuchs Act. We did not speak about how transgender people or Hijra people had historically been erased, persecuted, prosecuted under the Criminal Tribes Act. There's certain manifestation of caste, class, gender that came up within the petitions themselves, right? Akhil Kang and V. Ram did a brilliant conversation talking about that, and I think it is a must read. I'll post a link to that. I don't think I included it there. So when we talk about these symbolic harms, we often ignore the structural harms within the movement and within the judicialization of the movement, right? One of the things that comes to my mind is, I think, something that Ritu Dalmia wrote in the backdrop of Navtej. She said, look, we are not asking to be treated as a minority. We are not asking for quotas. We are not asking for reservations. We are only asking for dignity and privacy for who we are. Now, when such narratives are peddled within the MOVE community, with people who have significant class, caste privilege, it ignores that within the movement, much before NALSA, much before decriminalization, people like Grace Banu had been advocating for horizontal reservations for transgender people. This movement has, though gained momentum in recent times, traces back to 2009, 2010, right? So within the movement, there are conversations to be had. We must kind of understand that our cause is not distinguished, is not separate from within other marginalized groups within the movement. There are Dalit queer persons, there are Adivasi queer persons, there are disabled queer persons, there are peoples that quote unquote demand quotas and reservations, right? So when we take upon ourselves to call ourselves activists, to whether wittingly or unwittingly become the face of the movement, we must kind of actively question our own selves and our own biases. And that brings me to the law. When cases are taken to court, they are characteristically in a narrow scope. When you take a case to court, you don't ask for the sun, moon, and the stars. You go to the court and you say, look, this is how my right has been violated, and this is what we want you to do. As a matter of legal strategy, in retrospection, as one of the lawyers on the case, I can say that we went wrong perhaps in strategizing for Supriyo because we asked for a lot. And that was made evident by the judges on the very first day when they said, look, we're not looking into religious laws. We are only limiting ourselves to the Special Marriage Act. But again, hindsight is 2020. When you go to the court, you want to go with all guns blazing. In hindsight, perhaps there's always a scope for figuring out where you went wrong. But in this case, when you take cases to court, the wider activism that supports our cases has a very narrow focus, right? So going back to Navtej, when we talked about Navtej, Navtej suddenly became about love. Navtej suddenly became about wanting to be with the person of your choice. But Navtej was so much more than that. Navtej was about police excesses. Navtej was about democratizing access to public spaces. Navtej was about freedom, right? You cannot kind of garner massive support based on love. I think love is an important part of all of our lives, of our queerness. And while love is important, it cannot kind of not involve demands for structural change, because that comes to bite us back in our backside, right? I think one of the things that the Solicitor General said during Navtej in the very first day, he said, look, in Navtej, you gave them a right to love and to have sex with a person of their choice. Now they're asking for other windows to be opened, quote unquote. What are these other windows? These other windows in Supriyo was marriage. But in other cases, right, that have gone to the court, Devu Nair, for example, was about violence from natal families that have been brought out in the court by Rituparna's petition. And Rituparna is going to follow me, and I'm assuming she'll speak more about it. So when you go to court as a movement, you go with one issue, but you do not forget that there are demands for structural change. Second reason, I guess, why the queer rights are not under attack is the undercurrent of homo nationalism that runs within the movement today.
Yeah.
There is a politics of the nationalist right among a significant section of the queer population. Now, this population is fine with a uniform civil code so long as it gives you a right to marry as a queer person, forgetting at the same time that it will disenfranchise Muslims, it will disenfranchise other religious minorities, it will disenfranchise tribals, right? We saw that in the backdrop of Jammu and Kashmir and the repeal of Article 370, people saying that, oh, now queer people in Kashmir will have the right to love a person of their choice. They already had that right post Navtej. So, when you have a homo nationalist undercurrent, which perhaps is kind of given, which kind of credits Modi with undoing 377 when all Modi did was refuse to take a stand in court. And the support is best kind of seen as tolerance. What does it mean for our substantive legal rights in the law, in policy, in the public space, in the private space, are questions that we need to ask ourselves. People have argued broadly, a lot of people within the queer movement, people I greatly respect, that judges could not have delivered marriage equality, Saptarshi Mandal being one of the first people to have written on it. So why did we take the case to court, right? We took the case to court because we thought that there was a scope of victory. A lot of us believe that this was the best chance we have had in the coming few years, looking at the composition of the Supreme Court. Now, I want to go back to what Raj was saying. Raj was talking about a 44-year-old woman who wanted surrogacy. I happened to be in court in one of the previous hearings, and the same judge said, what we call a child of a single parent, we call it a B. B here, and she did not say what B meant, but B meant bastard, right? So when we are seeing all of these things pan out in our court, when we are seeing the Supreme Court kind of taking a regressive stand with seeing a clampdown on broader civil liberties, what role do we see for the queer movement? But more importantly, how do we shape the queer movement in a way that it is more inclusive? Now, and for that, let's go back to why do we go to court? The answer is straightforward. We go to court because we know that we have no other avenue left, right? The Supreme Court in the judgment says, oh, well, the parliament has never taken cognizance of it. But when we presented the case, and I know because I drafted that petition, we had shown exclusively to the court that, look, these are the instances in the past 5 years where issues of marriage equality, where issues of artificial reproduction, of surrogacy had come up before the parliament, and the parliament had chosen not to act on it because these were private members' bills. So the answer to us was straightforward, that we seek the coercive power of a judicial decree. But when we did so, I think a realization that we came across, and I did, was that litigation also shapes social movement in indirect ways. When we go to court, framing of a concept like asking for a right will frame grievances and unite activists, but it will also divide activists. Within the queer movement, a lot of people say that we don't want marriage, which is a very fair demand to want. At its heart, marriage is a patriarchal institution. Marriage will replicate caste endogamy. Marriage will replicate class and endogamy, as we've seen in heterosexual marriages. Queer marriages will be no different. But at the same time, you cannot forget that few months ago, a gay couple, one of whom committed suicide, the partner was not allowed to be at a funeral. He had to go to the High Court, get the High Court order saying that you can be present at a funeral. The sole reason that they did not do that was because they were unmarried. So while marriage is not for everybody, and I fully recognize it, it is a legitimate legal need for some. It is a legitimate legal need for opening joint bank accounts, legitimate legal need for housing, legitimate legal need for getting apartments on rent, legitimate legal need for health insurance, life insurance, right? It is about love, but it is about day-to-day conduct of our lives. And for people who want it, that avenue should be open to them. That is why we took that case to court. Now, the filing of a lawsuit, brings recalcitrant parties to the bargaining table. Now, on the seventh day of the hearings, the solicitor got up and said, "Oh, look, don't hear the case. We are going to form a committee under the chief secretary to look into the rights." And like we have seen in multiple cases, the Supreme Court took it at its face value and directed the constitution of a committee, the minority judgment. Nothing comes out of it until the recent elections, where all parties make some promises on that. It is only after that that the government goes and forms a committee. Now, what is the mandate of the committee? The committee is centered around legal personhood of individual persons. The mandate of the committee there was to look into the needs of the queer couple, as per the Solicitor General's own statement before the court. And they form a committee with a much narrower ambit, or an entirely different ambit is one way to look at it. Who does the committee consist of? Only secretaries to the Government of India. Now, somewhere in that notification says that the committee may seek inputs from experts. Who are these experts? We don't know. And if the constitution of the Central Trans Welfare Board is to be kind of seen, then I doubt that those experts will speak for the entire community. Indeed, I do not kind of say that I speak on behalf of the community. And no one person can. So how do we kind of mobilize our strategies to make a larger goal in us, in the way we create knowledge, in the way we kind of go to court, in the way we build the social movement, right? Let's talk about the Women's Reservation Bill. There's a broad consensus in our society. Number one, namely that women are underrepresented, and number two, that they deserve sufficient political representation. Now, it did not happen until much recently, even though demands had been made over the past few decades. And even when that happened, it happened in a half-hearted fashion by saying that, look, this will come into force after the next delimitation exercise. We don't know when the delimitation exercise will take place. So, a passing of a law, and I want to again go back to the conversation around the mental health bill, is that a passing of a law does not necessarily precipitate into actionable rights. So when we bring forth anti-majoritarian litigation in courts to shape rights of a community that has been historically disenfranchised, that has been structurally marginalized, we do that because we see that courts have become kind of the last bastion of checks and balances. Now, even within courts, right, over the past few months, we've seen quite some strange happenings. In the in the Punjab and Haryana High Court, for example, we've seen a judge throwing the file at a lawyer and telling her to take the case of a queer couple back to where it came from. And the reason he said, this is immoral. And he said, for me, my personal morality is the constitutional morality. And that is not how the law stands. The stance of the law has been that the constitutional morality dictates that two adult persons in a consensual relationship should be allowed to live together. And this is happening more and more now, you know. Judicial activism is stopping, and courts are increasingly becoming aware of the limits of its own political capital. So courts kind of don't pick and choose the issues on which they want to expend their political capital, right? And that has been kind of a conversation that legal scholars have been having, that political scientists have been having, not just in India, but across the world, in the United States, in the United Kingdom. So let us have a broader conversation around queer people, queer lawyers, the law, queerness, the movement, and an amalgamation. But when we have it, you know, we must not forget that this movement owes so much of its origins, so much of its current functionality to sex workers, to transgender persons, to Dalit, Bahujan, and Adivasi persons, to grassroots workers who for decades, right, did nothing but go to public cruising spots and distribute condoms, distribute safe sex materials, distribute pamphlets. People who kind of led the fight against Section 377 and who find themselves, and I'm going to borrow this term from Professor Oishik Sirkar and Deepika Jain, who say that they find themselves erased in the picture that irons out the unruly creases of historical inexplicability that is ready to adorn the manicured walls of our aesthetically curated memory museum, right? The way of framing the queer rights movement, as I see it, is that it was not led by elite politicians, it was not led by elite judges, it was not led by elite lawyers. It was led by people who never make it to the front pages. It was led by people who went around organizations like ABVA, where everybody from the who's who of Delhi who were queer to sex workers came at a common platform, right? The conversations are dying down because the divides are far. The crevices are showing up. Hard work now needs to be done by all of us to build bridges, because we are 10% of the population divided across a country which is the fifth largest country in terms of landmass, which is the largest country in terms of population size. So unless we are able to form a concentrated bloc, a concentrated constituency that advocates for our rights, there will be disagreements. There's no doubt about it. There will be disagreements. There will be people who don't see eye to eye with each other. But let us have those conversations. Let us try to win hearts and minds within the community. Let's go back to kind of Supriyo now. What has been happening to Supriyo? Now, each case that goes to court has a life after the judgment of the case is out, right? With Koshal, we saw no going back. But with Supriyo, we have not seen much pushback against the courts. If, as a movement, the queer movement has to tap into the power of the law to effectuate meaningful change, we cannot stop at the judgment. We must use the power of the law, litigation, advocacy, to kind of hold the government to account, to engage in dialogue, to engage in building the movement through conversation. Now, let's go to some of the post-Supriyo learnings that I have had. And let's just dissect Supriyo a bit. Now, there were 5 judges on the case. For an issue of whether there is a fundamental right to marry, 4 judges vehemently rejected the proposition, saying that there's no fundamental right to marry. Now, what does that mean? It means that the right to marry is only permissible as much as the parliament allows you to, and no further. It means the parliament can give the right and the parliament can take it away. Justice Chandrachud's opinion, for some reason, is very strange. He said, this will allow and compel the state to create a new institution when it has chosen not to create it. The answer was, and it's very strange because that was not what we were asking for. What we were asking for was an assimilation into a pre-existing structure of the state. Indeed, petitions of Rituparna were asking for natal family protections, and even that petition, in my mind, was asking for kind of creation of not an alternate structure, but reimagining an existing structure. Justice Narasimha said that, in his opinion, said that there was a fundamental freedom but not a fundamental right. Now, what does that mean? That means that you can do it, but you cannot compel the state to recognize it unless the state outlaws it. However, strangely, the court held that transgender persons in heterosexual relationships have the right to marry under the Special Marriage Act or the religious laws. So marriage no longer is a bond of affection or bond of equality, but is reduced at its very core to a combination of genitals. If you have the right genitals, or if you have different genitals created in a cishet model, and then you happen to be a couple, then you can marry. Simply put, this means that trans men can marry cis or trans women, and trans women can marry cis or trans men. I think, and this was the silver lining that came out of the judgment. But I do want to kind of, how much time do I have? I've kind of lost track of the time. I can't hear you.
Take another 10 minutes, I say.
10 minutes. 10 minutes. Okay, fine. So I do want to kind of go back to the whole idea of building solidarities. Some arguments, that were made in the petitions were rooted in dignity, some in the right to family, others in impermissibility of discrimination. The furthest that the majority judgment went was to recognize a right to relationship, which translates into choosing a partner, cohabiting, enjoying personal intimacy, and to live in the way that you wish to, but no further, right? For those of you who follow the news, I don't know if you know, but recently a gay couple in Bombay was arrested because they bought a child. Now, while you do not want to encourage trafficking of children, I don't think that this invited criminality. What other option are we to left with? How do we kind of balance the rights, the denial of rights versus the legitimate need to have a family, whether natal or chosen, right? So the law often does not recognize the discriminatory impact of law on queer persons, and the judgment recognizes that there is a discriminatory impact. Both the majority and minority judgment have to be at some level have recognized the discrimination that queer people go through, but have not remedied it, right? Now, and that goes to how we understand family law and goes back to Rituparna's petition. We have borrowed the old English system and borrowed the way we look at families. Families are created, as the English law tells us, by marriage, by blood, or by adoption, right? That has been kind of coming back to the conversation around decolonialization, has been to kind of colonial way of looking at the family that we borrow because we are a common law system. But we have a history, a rich history at that, of chosen families that the court could have recognized. We have for decades have had Hijra Gharanas, the Hijra Jamaats, which have kind of recognized that families, natal families themselves can be a site of violence. Even as couples, right? In Baroda, for example, you had a few decades ago, a lesbian couple who entered into what they called a Maitri Karar, or which translates into a friendship agreement from Gujarati. So they had kind of these systems that went outside of the English understanding of creation or coming together of a family, of intimate associations. And so I think while the judgment does feel like a deep personal failure and reviews have been filed, the goal also for us is to chart a future course, to chart a manifesto. That manifesto has for long been drawn by lawyers, but it is time to kind of truly democratize the movement. Courts will not deliver equality. Judges will not deliver equality. Equality and its manifestations have to be drawn by the movement, have to be drawn by activists. And these are the issues that will come up for fight both inside and outside the court. And these issues, as the government called it, are not urban, they're not elite, but they are the truths of the lives of hundreds of thousands of queer people in this country. The way that queer lives intersect with the heterosexual world in its social, legal, economic, and overall manifestations is far from perfect. We must continue to fight for individual rights, but at the same time, there is a need to build solidarities within movements. The demand for protection from natal family is not very different from the demand for criminalization of marital rape. Both of them stem from a patriarchal understanding of the family. Similarly, the demand for horizontal reservations for trans and intersex persons is not different from the anti-caste movement. The demand for opposition of marriage, for example, right, is not very different from those within the feminist movement that oppose marriage as a patriarchal institution. So in that, I'll just say this, that to be queer in a way that the law does not recognize your relationships, does not recognize your love, does not recognize your alternate structures, will only give you courts sympathizing with the lack of recognition. There is no other alternative but to do the solid work of movement building, of policy advocacy, and taking cases to court also. But that has not succeeded. How do we then chart a way forward and kind of ensure that the way ahead is that in a way ahead in which there are divisions within the community and there are divisions for good reasons? People have been structurally erased. People have been structurally disenfranchised within the movement. And I am part of the problem as a lawyer from Delhi, who's English speaking upper caste. The idea is to build a manifesto based on consultations within the community across the country. There are wounds, but we live in strange times. The broader political scenario of the country with a clampdown on civil liberties, an attack on civil society. The Prime Minister had famously said a few months before his elections that I'm going to finish the civil society. And he has succeeded with reasonable success by kind of cutting down on funding, by going after activists across the country. And there are systemic attacks now on constitution, on life, liberty, and secularism. And if we as a movement fall prey to such tropes, we cannot be an inclusive movement. The movement should give kind of as much space for a queer Kashmiri Muslim as it does to somebody like me who's an upper class person from Delhi. We must be loyal to the values of inclusivity. And I think there's a lot of exclusion and oppression from within that kind of requires introspection from a lot of us. And I think, why is that? I leave you with this final question. Why is it that pride marches kind of evoke tens of thousands of people and get tens of thousands of people out on the street, but a movement or a rally for horizontal reservation can see not less than 50 people, can see only less than 50 people on the streets? And how do we kind of then factor in these inequalities while we frame policy is a question that I leave you with. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rohin Bhatt, for shedding light on such an important issue and for inspiring all of us to advocate for positive change. Thank you immensely for your time and wisdom. Now, the floor is open for questions from the audience. You can raise your hands or type in the Q&A box. Meanwhile, I request our chair for the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel, to add her comments on the session.
Yeah. Thank you, Advocate Rohin Bhatt, for bringing out such a disheartening scenario from the Indian judiciary, because we in the women's movement were used to judicial activism of the 80s, and so many progressive laws, Justice Krishna Iyer or Justice Bhagwati and all had brought, and now we are in such a depressing scenario. When it comes to even bureaucrats, like we know that when the hearing was going on, a group of 104 ex-bureaucrats and 16 former judges and IPS officers, they all had written open letter to President of India, urging her intervention and quote unquote saving Indian cultural tradition, religious tenets and social values. And they also labeled non-heterosexual marriages as offensive to our values, besides being rational and unnatural. So if this is the kind of attitude, bureaucrats as well as the criminal justice system, rather the police force also has it, in a everyday life, how do we ensure safety, security to the community? And can we also try for the legislative route? How many members of parliament, the legislators at the subnational level, and the people who are active in politics supporting the movement openly? Can we lobby?
That's a very interesting question. First, let's go back to the fundamental question. Who defines what is Indian? Who defines what are our values, right? What is the only thing that binds us as a people, as a nation, is the Constitution. So nobody's individual values can interfere with rights of other people. That's the first part. The second part is that I don't think those open letters serve any purpose except for publicity, right? They are used to stoke public debates, to sound arguments of alarm. They know it as well as we do that nothing, president can do the square root of nothing once a case is in court. The third part of your question spoke about Justice Krishna Iyer. Let me tell you, Professor Patel, that the days of Justice Krishna Iyer are long behind us. These are times of, let me not name them for the fear of contempt, but these are strange times where, a sitting chief minister's, whether he's eating mangoes or not, is discussed in courts. So the level of judicial discourse has kind of fallen down to such a level that that it is impossible to kind of have a sound debate in court. Look at the arguments that were made in the marriage equality case, for example. The Solicitor General very nicely gets up and says, oh, tomorrow if I want to marry my sister, will this court allow it? Now, its arguments are made into absurdity in courts these days. So the days of judicial activism might come back, because now for the first time we are dealing in the past 10 years with a coalition government. And if history tells us anything, is that when we have had coalition governments, the courts have kind of stepped up. So that remains to be seen whether courts step up or not. But my analysis of studying individual ideologies of judges in the Supreme Court, in the High Court, and the broader judicial kind of scene today tells me that might be perhaps too premature to kind of bank our hopes on judicial activism. And the final question was whether we can try the legislative route. Now, Pink List India is an organization that's run by Anish Gawande and Smriti Deora. They trace the stance of MPs on LGBTQ issues. They've come up 5 days or 6 days ago with the first part of their analysis of our MPs, which say that 108 out of 543 MPs have been vocal on LGBTQ issues. Now, that means that we have to wait for further data by them on how many of them have been positive, how many of them have been negative. But there's also, for the first time, a growing significant presence of queerness in political manifestos. So we might see some things there. Even the BJP has promised Garima Greys and more Garima Greys in the future. But those Garima Greys are criminally underfunded. Uttar Pradesh, with its largest population of transgender persons, does not have a single Garima Grey. There are problems within the Garima Grey system, which one hopes will be kind of addressed in the coming government. And that is the bare minimum that we can expect that can happen. But like I said, it's too much premature. We must wait for a few months, at least, to see how the parliament functions with these new equations before. But I think before we do anything, right, I think a conversation needs to be had within the movement. Get all stakeholders, get lawyers, get activists, get policymakers to a table, address disagreements, address distrust, and then kind of move on and move forward with, at least, if nothing, a common minimum charter that we can all agree on, as I see it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from the audience members? Okay, I had a question meanwhile. So like you spoke about bringing everyone under the same movement and there being more inclusivity in that regard. But in a country like India, we do acknowledge that there is a very vast cultural diversity. So how do you propose that we not only get like people of different castes and but also reach the rural and the most remote areas as well in India?
I think the best way to look at it is how Tamil Nadu has been drafting its LGBT policy. What has been doing is they are building a policy under the supervision of the High Court. And the members of the committee who are involved with drafting the LGBT policy have gone to every single district, multiple villages, trying to build consensus on the policy. So again, look, national consultations cannot happen unless there have been domestic consultation. A need of a queer person from Tamil Nadu versus a need of a queer person in Manipur will never be the same, right? So you built a movement by building several movements within. All these movements have to have intra-movement solidarity. There are people who say kind of affected by the internal ethnic conflict in Manipur, right? I've been helping a lot of people, trans people there, who've kind of been prosecuted by the police there, or who've been facing police harassment. At the same time, in Delhi, where most of my legal practice is based, I'm helping runaway queer couples, right? So the issues that plague the community are vast, they are diverse. But at some point, we have to chart out a manifesto of our collective needs. That look, this is the bare minimum that we demand. There is no doubt that there is caste discrimination, so horizontal reservations is one of them, right? Opposition to the Trans Act, another issue that across the country there is consensus that it needs to go, right? Number 3, marriage equality for those who want it, and intimate chosen families for those who want that, right? All these demands, as I see it, are not opposite. They are not conflicting, but they are just different. And there's no need for us to take adversarial stances within the movement, right?
Right.
So the idea is to build solidarities within the movement and outside the movement. And I think that is a lot of work that we need to do over the coming few years, decades.
Right. Thank you so much. Seeing that there are no other questions and looking at the time constraints, we will now
No, I
be
have a question
right. Go ahead.
to Mr. Rohit. Okay. Anybody could answer, even if ma'am can answer. Does a horizontal quota or the reservation give importance to queer community as, I mean, is it justifiable? Is it really gives, I mean, I'm not very sure about it. That's the reason I'm asking. Have they given equal importance to the queer community in the horizontal reservation?
Please unmute
Mr.
yourself.
Rohit, your audio is not heard.
That is a conversation that is happening within the movement as we speak, as to what is the right way of accessing reservation, who should be in the reservation. There's significant disagreement about who and how should the horizontal reservation take place. Now, the issue of reservation is a fairly complex legal issue, but let me kind of just give you an oversight as to how horizontal reservations take place, right? So let us assume that there are 100 seats, out of which 50 seats are reserved for SC, ST, and OBC communities. The demand has been for 1% horizontal reservation based on the Kerala model. It means that out of those 100, 150, or let's say 200, so the math becomes easier. If out of 200, 100 seats are reserved, 1 seat should be reserved for a trans or an intersex person. Now, why horizontal reservation is a question that I get asked often a lot, and I think that was also your question. The answer is that the way in India, due to historical factors of achieving upward economic and social mobility, has been public employment and public education. That is due to a variety of factors. And so when the Constitution creates two types of reservations, number one for women and number two for SC/ST women, for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, a horizontal reservation acknowledges that we don't exist on a single axis of identity. We exist, our identities are intersectional. And so creating a reservation within a reservation or a quota within a quota is important to ensure that people whose identities have led to multiple layers of oppression are given their due, are given not just their due, but what is their right constitutionally. It has been done for disability with extreme success. It has been done in Kerala for trans persons with good success, but it does not end there, right? Because it's a whole different struggle once you get there. And you need an inclusive workspace, you need inclusive policies, you need gender neutral bathrooms. So it's a start of getting there. Once you get there, there are a whole different struggles that people will be faced with. So if your answer is this enough? It is not enough, but it is a very good starting point, and it is a starting point because it is a constant.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from the audience members? Okay. Seeing none, we will now be concluding the session. First of all, I would really like to thank.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I just quickly make a very quick question if it's allowed?
Yeah.
It was a very good talk and enjoyed thoroughly, but little skeptical, I must say. If we do not expect a lot from the judiciary as well, and if we believe that the only way forward is through a movement, a social movement, where do you see India in the next 10 years? I just want to see if in near future or in 10 years time, are we expecting any positive things happening? Exactly which milestones do you believe we would have been achieved we would achieve in the next 10 years? If you could just quickly comment on that, please. Thank you.
I think it's too soon to say. I think, look, with the recent prosecutions of Professor Shaukat, of Arundhati Roy, I think, we are far from safe as a democracy. So we still need to wait out as to see how third term will pan out. So it's too soon to say. And again, you ask me for goals, I tell you that it's not for me to chart any goal. The goal charting has to be done as a community as a whole. I can't do that. One person should not do that. So one hopes that conversation starts about creating a charter of demands, about creating a manifesto for the movement within the community across the country. And I think that if we have done that, I think that will go a long way in advocating for our needs.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from the audience member? Okay. So now we will be concluding the session. First of all, I would really like to thank Advocate Rohin Bhatt for his insightful speech. Your expertise was invaluable, and it was truly an honor for us to have the privilege of learning from you. We really look forward to having the privilege of welcoming you back in our future events. Thank you so much for such a comprehensive overview of the legal landscape. Now, it is my honor to call upon Ms. Rituparna Borah Co-director Nazaria, a queer feminist resource group, New Delhi, to shed light on the topic body image and self-worth, sexuality in media. We welcome.
Yeah. Hi. Vibhuti.
Okay. Sorry, something has happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, hi. Am I audible?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I'm trying to share my content.
Yeah. You are on the panel, so you will be able to share the green icon, share screen.
Yes. Hi, everyone. After this amazing speech talk by Rohin, I don't know if it'll be bored or this thing, but I really try to keep it interactive. I can't give a speech, but I hope whatever I say makes some sense about body image, body, sexuality, gender. One thing that I heard about reservation and horizontal reservation, I am someone who came from reservation. And I'm an indigenous person. I came through reservation. And what Rohin said about reservation is not the end goal and it needs to be inclusive. I totally agree to what they have said because reservation is just one stop, but to be where I am today and to lead an organization and to come from the Northeast and to be part of the mainland India, and then to be calling myself Indian, quote unquote, Indian queer feminist activist, it is very, very difficult. So just reservation, just horizontal reservation. I am a lesbian woman with disability and then from the Northeast. So it's very, very difficult. Just only reservation will or a horizontal reservation will not help. I think we need to make it more inclusive. I think with that, I'll try and start my this thing. I'm trying to share my screen. I'm not able to screen it. Stop. Something is wrong. Okay, just give me 1 minute. Okay, so it will be a participatory thing. So I hope everyone joins me in this thing. So the first question I'm going to ask you, my pronouns are she and they. So you don't need to call me Rituparna ji, just call me Rituparna, she and they is fine. So first question that I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to send the PPT to the group so that they can show it here, is to actually rate your body parts from 3 to 1. So you'll have to speak. So it's 3 by 3, 2 by 3, and 1 by 3. So if you say which body part you want to rate, 3 by 3, 2 by 3, and 1 by 3. So please go ahead and start talking. And if you talk, it'll be good. And to tell you, I can't see no one. So who wants to start?
Well, if you mean by rating the body parts in a way that
You see yourself as.
okay,
Just rating.
I'll say 3 out of 3.
Yeah, 3 out of 3 to, for example, if you say 3 out of 3, I'll say 3 out of 3 to my hair, something like that.
I'll say 3 out of 3 to my face.
Face, okay, and
2
out of
well
2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 किसको दोगे आप?
to my legs maybe.
Legs, okay, great. Or 1 out of 3.
I won't rate 1 out of 3 to any of my body parts.
नहीं आप सोचो आप दोगे थोड़ा honestly जवाब दोगे. Let's be honest.
Maybe my hair.
Hair.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
they're falling, so yeah.
Hair is falling.
Yes.
Okay, face को क्यों दोगे आप? Any idea?
Because that's the part of the body which is more projectable every time wherever we go. People. It's the kind of identity we have. So it's a symbol of me as a person, and I'm identifiable from my face. So I have to
You like,
present.
okay.
Now you can see,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, legs को क्यों 2 out of 3 दोगे?
2 out of 3 to my legs because obviously, mostly they're covered. So
Mostly
it's
they're covered.
yeah. So it's for
ठीक
me
है,
to
ठीक है.
see it. Yeah.
Or hair because it's falling. That's what you
Yes.
say.
Yes.
हाँ,
That's
ठीक है. Great. कोई और? Vibhuti, I've sent you the PPT on your Gmail, director of IMPRI बोल के. If that Gmail ID works. Okay, next. कौन जाना चाहेगा? You'll have
But
to
don't we
say
think we
something.
are beyond bodies?
No,
Which
the
means our
body.
identity is not
Body.
depends on how we are structured.
No, अभी हम body के बारे में बात करेंगे, बाद में हम किसी और के बारे में
Ma'am,
बात
sorry,
we'll
I
talk.
don't understand Hindi. Sorry, ma'am.
Yeah. So first we'll talk about our body, then we'll talk about whatever else we'll have to talk. But let's talk about body.
Vibhuti, I have a question. Amita here. Hello.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't understand what she's asking actually.
So ask her, no? Ask Rituparna.
You can ask me.
Amita,
You can ask
you
me.
can ask directly, no?
I didn't understand what you meant by 2, 3. I mean, could you please
Okay.
elaborate?
Yes. So I'm asking you if you have to rate your body parts 3 by 3, 3 out of 3, 2 out of 3, and 1 out of 3. How do you rate your body parts? For example, me, just example like hair, I'll give 3 out of 3. I'll give the reason because I love my hair. So I do something or the other to my hair. 2 out of 3, I would give to my back. 1 out of 3, I'll give to my foot. So something like that. So
I think
we'll go to that.
everyone wants to give total marks 3 out of 3 to every body part.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
No, let's talk about the body parts really honestly, because this is a time, and also I want you to be honest, because let's be honest that we have been trying to talk about body image, body parts, body sexuality and gender, and sometimes it is tiring to see ourselves in this world of capitalism. And I'll also talk about why, but let's start with ourselves first. And I think it's important to start with ourselves because it's easier to talk about the outside world. But I think sometimes as feminists or as people who are working in the development sector, we want to see ourselves as these perfect beings who have no issues with anything. But maybe we have. So I'm asking you to go deeper. And then also, let's be honest in this session. And also, I think Vibhuti might have laid some rules in the beginning that we will not judge anyone. So with this assumption in mind,
it is a non-threatening, non-judgmental platform.
please, yeah.
This is the third day, and this is the, I think, 8th session. So it has
yeah. So let us start with a very honest conversation. I'm going to talk beyond the body. I'm going to talk about so many issues which is about gender and sexuality, but let's start with this body, because the first thing that I got was body.
Ma'am, if I can speak, I'm Shreya Pandey.
Yes.
Ma'am, this is a very, very difficult question that you really
Yes.
asked. You've
Yes.
caught us. You've put us in a corner for that matter.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
No, I mean, you got me thinking, and I've never really thought holistically about my body as such, and I feel and I just realize I have a very low self-esteem. So regarding my body parts, that is largely because I have been short. My father was always concerned, how will I get married? Because these are certain traditional parameters that you should have. You should be tall enough, and I just had a surgery, so that because of that I have a very low self-esteem. So I feel very low. I feel very weak. So I would not give a good rating to myself as far as my body parts are concerned, unfortunately. And I have falling hair, everything after post surgery that you have. I am in my 40s, so a very low self esteem and therefore a very low ranking.
Shreya, and thank you for considering this as a safe space and talking about your vulnerabilities. It's not easy, Shreya. It's really not easy. And I also shared you about my vulnerabilities as well. But thank you for sharing this, because that's why we need to talk about bodies. Because there are different kinds of bodies. And Shreya, falling hair is there, surgeries are there, but is there something in your body that you really, really like sometimes? Sometimes. Not about what your mother says, not about what others says, but you like it. Not about what anyone else says, but you think it is nice.
Maybe my face, when I get time to look at my face, because I have a daughter as well. I'm super busy, and seriously, never. I mean, it comes as a shock that, oh, I haven't done my threading or something. When it happens only when it comes to a special occasion. Now the priorities have changed, so it is like I just have to show up irrespective of how I look, and that is a sad thing. I'm working on it, of course. That I need to respect myself more, appreciate myself more, but that is the sad part. Maybe my face, ma'am.
Thank you so
And
much.
if
Thank
you
you so much.
yeah.
Yeah. No, yes. Thank you so much, Shreya. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Vibhuti, did you get my PPT?
I think your PPT has gone to Director IMPRI. So Dr. Arjun Singh will have to. Otherwise, you can, if you send it to vibhuti.np@gmail.com, I can share it. Yes.
Okay. I'll just see. Anyone else wants to share? It's like I'm really grateful that Shreya shared this. And that's why I shared and I asked this question.
Even if
Anyone,
you
please.
send it to all, no?
Ma'am, if I may add to what I just said, that
Yes.
when I look in the past, I remember I was in JNU, but still there was a lot of body shaming there also. And what they would say was that you're too fat, you're too fat. But then when I look at all this in retrospect, I feel I was much prettier then. So that pressure has always been there, and that is what I try to tell my students, that you should just stay away from people who demoralize you, who say you're too fat, you're too thin, you're too ugly, you are too fair, you are too dark.
Great you're saying this. We'll talk about that as well. But anyone else who wants to add? There's so many of you. I can see like many participants. So anyone else? Please do join in, because the discussions become interesting when you join in. Someone asked Professor Patel that they didn't get the question.
Yeah.
If they got the question, can they?
Yeah. Amita Buch, can you? Yeah. From Ahmedabad. Yes.
Yeah, I got the question. But young days and grown up years, I'm just shuffling between the two. Many people tell me when you were young, you were looking so good, so nice. They don't tell me directly, you don't look so good now. So that is, something which makes me think that what happened to these years? that I'm not looking as good as I used to and all that stuff. So you made me think along those lines. I'm not yet very specific about the answer, but I'm talking about my journey after the question that you
Yes,
threw.
yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for
Ritu-
again thinking about your journey. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Rituparna, can you just forward your PPT to me?
I did that. I did that.
That is vibhuti.np@gmail.com.
Yes, yes, yes.
You
yes.
have my Gmail email ID.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, I have your Jimmy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Okay, got it.
anyone else?
Got it, got it.
Anyone else who have who want to answer, who have questions, who want to answer?
Somebody's written in the textbook that
Oh, text.
repeat the question. So please kindly repeat it for them.
What to take? Could you share the question again, please? I lost the connection. Okay. So the question was if you could rate your body parts from 1 to 3. So it's 3 by 3, 3 by 3, 2 by 3, and 1 by 3. Did you get my question?
I can say that initially I could have rated 3 by 3, but now I would rate 1 by 3 because lots of things.
For what? 1 by 3 to what, Amita?
3 mean you mean the highest optimum, right?
Yes, but to what? Which body part?
Everything like hair. I used to have beautiful hair, which is grown much thinner, and weight also has grown. I can't say is growing, but has grown. Earlier, I used to manage my weight. Now, it is little more difficult to manage the weight, and energy. I feel. I mean, if we can consider it a part of the body, no, we can't. I think energy we cannot include, right?
No, the body now.
Yeah, but I feel that one thing good, one mark I give to my height, because I have 5.45, 4.5, and I very often feel that even if I don't get dressed properly, my height will carry me, and I feel good about that. You know, कि चलो, even if you are not dressed up, people will look at your height and accept you, kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Confident.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone else who wants to add?
Hi, Rituparna. I'm Jade.
Yeah, Jade. Hi.
Yeah, so 3 being the highest, I would rate for my hair. It's curly and is often a talking point. So people usually immediately are on either extreme, either about talking about how it's so wonderful or talking about the other extreme of it. And I've had all varied reactions about it all through my life. 2, I would give to possibly my wrist. I like my wrist, but maybe I won't give it 3, but 2 to my wrists, and 1 for my nose, because according to me, I think it's a bit disproportionate to my face.
Okay, you think. Someone has told you something about it?
Yeah, I did have a reaction where someone, an extended family member, once told me that if I was ever thinking of getting some work done, I should think of getting a nose job.
Yeah. Swati said that they can't possibly.
Yes, I can talk now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So, ma'am, thank you for that question. So I understand there should be a reason why you asked this question, but I cannot rate my body parts because somehow I believe that all of it is the same. I'm not able to give a ranking for that, but I want to share an experience. So, culturally in India, we put our hands together to say namaste, to say vanakkam. I'm from Tamil Nadu, so we put our hands together to say vanakkam. But when my baby was when she was an infant, so, infants throw legs in the air. They kick their legs in the air, and once she put both her foot together, and I was jokingly commenting, saying that she is telling namaste in her legs with her feet. And some of the elders in the family, they said, no, that is very disrespectful. You can't say this say this to, so you can't say this because Vanakkam, Namaste is generally done using hands and not using the
Hands.
feet. So you can't say that. Then that got me to thinking that why is that discrimination? Who attaches respect to parts of the body? What I mean, you can't essentially function without your limbs and feet, right? So who attaches respect? I had that question. So I see how the societal and cultural construct plays a role here to attach to force us, that is forcing us to rank forcing us to rank the parts of a body. So I wanted to share this.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Swati, for saying this. Vibhuti, did you get my PPT?
Yes, it can be shared.
Yeah.
Whenever you want.
No, you can share it now.
Okay.
So anyway, if anyone wants to share, they can share.
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So so thank you for sharing. So we all know what body image is, right? So we can go back to the body feature. 1, 2, 3. Vibhuti?
Yeah. Previous one, na?
Yeah, previous one.
Yes.
Okay. So if anyone wants to share, they can share. But you know what body image is? Yes, no? See, I will not give a speech for sure. And Vibhuti knows that I'll keep on instigating you. I'll keep on I'll make you talk. And you'll have to get the answers from yourself. I'm not a lecturer, I'm a trainer. Even though I've studied in JNU, I've done everything, but I'm still a trainer. So you know what body image is? Yes?
Yeah, I think it just refers to how you perceive your own body to be, like how you think of your own appearance, if you like it or not, and what parts you like and which parts you don't like.
Which parts you don't like? Yeah, thank you so much. That is basically your body images.
Rituparna, I think body image is created by the films, Bollywood films.
Okay, Bollywood films.
And we consider that a perfect body of a woman or a man, you know?
Yeah. Okay, coming to films, Bollywood, Hollywood, Tollywood, whatever wood it is. Okay, now can you talk about your favorite female actor and a male actor? Anyone? Whatever genre, whichever industry it is. And why, of course. I will always ask why.
Can I answer it quickly?
Yes, go ahead.
I'll go for Madhuri Dixit. She's always been an inspiration, and I just
Why?
big fan of her because the way she dances and the way she uses her expression through her body movements, that's just phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Even from her eyes and the movement of her facial expression. I mean, she's a complete package. I think she's a wonderful actor, wonderful dancer. And the way she speaks, the way she carries herself, I think it's very elegant. Looks very elegant to me.
Yeah, I can just visualize from your words that how much you admire her. Anyone else? Yes. Anyone else who wants to talk about film industry?
I appreciate Shah Rukh Khan.
Why?
Because first of all, though, of course, all through he has been very proportionate. So maybe he's taking care of his health, his body, and he suits his role, whether as an actor or as a presenter or as an anchor. Everywhere so far I have not found him imperfect or stupid or imbalanced. Wherever he is even like when he's giving speeches, I feel he's coming out from the heart. He speaks from his heart.
Okay. Someone said Jimmy Shergill also. Yeah, taken because of his innocence. Anyone else? Jaldi, quick. There's so many female, male actors. Yeah, Shreya. Who do you want to? You said Jimmy Shergill, yeah. Who else wants to talk about their favorite movie stars? No one else?
Okay, if no one is saying, I can just further comment on the male actor that I like from the Indian cinema. I like Ranbir Kapoor. But again, because of the kind of looks he has, and the way he acts, and the way he uses his body energy, especially, and put it in his role, especially in a film called Barfi, where he was playing a role of a special person who can't speak. He was just phenomenal. I just loved the way he carried it. He did this role, and using obviously his expressions and the sign language and the other parts of the body as well.
Anyone else wants to add? It's a chance to talk about your favorite movie star. No judgments here.
I used to like Smita Patil because I considered her a combination of Shabana Azmi and kind of Madhuri Dixit, in the sense she was good, look-wise also good, and acting-wise also she was good. So I used to like Smita Patil.
I think it's only Mita, Gohil, and Shreya who are now talking about their favorite movie stars, and no one else wants to talk about the movie stars. Vibhuti, you want to tell about your favorite actor?
My favorite actor is Guru Dutt.
Guru Dutt. Why?
Because I found him very genuine in his emotion. No, there was no pretense. Whatever was there in his heart was seen on his face. So I think that was the one which touched me.
Okay, my favorite actor is Song Joong Ki from Korean industry, because his eyes are very small. I think I find resemblance to my culture. Yeah. So I think many people have not heard about Song Joong Ki. Anyway, next. So body image is basically what we think about ourselves, but from the experiences that we have heard, it is what people have also perceived about us. Like what someone said about how their mother or parents used to talk about it, relatives used to talk about what kind of woman you do like when you want to get married. Look at the matrimonial columns. Greatest example of what kind of woman you do want to be. If you actually look at if I ask you today to imagine Bharat Mata, Mother India, the first image that will come to your mind is of a woman like a drop dead, quote unquote gorgeous. I don't know what the image of gorgeousness is, but very Aryan looking woman. And I'm using the word Aryan consciously because all the actors in movie industries are mostly Aryan looking Bollywood actors. And I'm sorry to say, I'm from Northeast. I belong to an indigenous culture. I do not see the representation of people like me as the main protagonist of film industries. They're either villain, for example, Denny Denjoppa, or Helen, or maybe a sidekick, but never the main protagonist. Would you imagine someone like me, a fat-bodied, or with curly hair, red hair, to be the ideal Bharat Mata? Definitely not. Right? With a dress or no ornaments, no kajal, no lipstick. Vibhuti, will you or will the country allow someone to be the Bharat Mata? No, right? No, absolutely not. You will be actually, to be a Bharat Mata, to be the Mother India, you will actually have to be someone Aryan looking. Madhuri Dixit got all these roles of Tumka and Jhumka. We forgot Helen, who could dance actually way better than
Yes,
how Madhuri used to dance. But Helen was from Myanmar, and a refugee.
Yeah.
Who would actually think of Helen?
Correct.
She was a refugee. She did not have those features which the male in India would refer to as a good, quote unquote, the good characteristic of this thing. And therefore, there is so much focus on weight. There's so much focus on age. And I'm glad you brought this up, Amrita, that when I was young, people would call me beautiful. I felt confident. There's so much ageism attached to bodies that when you are old, you should not wear these kind of clothes. And therefore, the actors like Neena Gupta and all are facing so much trolls that why do you wear short clothes when you're growing so old? You have to wear decent clothes. You have certain markers of your body. And the reason, Swati, I'm asking about body feature is because body is very, very, very important. The body is what is actually everyone is looking at. The first thing that you notice is body. Is that person dark skin or fair skin? Is that body comes from a certain class? Does that body comes from a certain class background? Does that body sweat? Does that body stinks? What kind of stink is that? Does that body wear a Muslim hat? Does that body is carrying a Hindu saffron, this thing? What kind of body is that? Does that body have small eyes? And therefore, body feature is very, very, very important. And that's what body image is. Because body image is not what we think of our bodies. And trust me, it will take ages to think of ourselves as quote unquote beautiful, because the idea of beauty, and I could hear words like stupid, ugly, not good looking, long hair, short hair. Swati, thank God. Thank you for talking about namaste, namaskaram, vanakkam. You talked about where legs are not used. So many things all of you have said about actually reflects what the society thinks about the body, the use of the body, the aggressive body, the docile body, how to walk when a bride, when a groom comes to look at the bride, how to walk when a bride leaves the the maternal home. So the body itself is very important, and the body is not alone. The body carries a lot of trauma within us. The trauma of being told, don't sit like this, don't sit wide-legged, sit like this, wear a dupatta, wear a chadar, wear the sari like this, don't show your like the cleavage, don't show your midriff. And therefore the body, and surprisingly, we have not talked about our sexual body parts. The breast, the vagina, the lips, I don't know, because many of us have not made to like our body so much. So this is why body image, the concept of body is very, very important. Vibhuti, next slide.
Yeah.
The next slide.
Next one.
Next slide. Sorry, it's
After this?
something else. No, next slide.
Next slide. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the things that you have heard what things that people have said to you about your body? Some good things and also some negative things. If you can also share. Good things and also not so good things. Can anyone share? And it's about you.
Can I go now first as well?
Yeah.
God, yes.
I think I'm the icebreaker here. So
Yes. Your voice is breaking.
Actually, because am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, maybe I'll have to switch off the camera. Okay, I was saying that it's an important question because a lot of times we don't realize the perceptions that we have for our own bodies and our own selves and how people rate that. In my experiences, if we talk about, the South Asian perspective to me is you have, as somebody said earlier, very rightly, that we have that imagery which is presented through films and through the showbiz industry, and we think that that's the ideal kind of male or female one should be. So a lot of times we look for masculine men to be considered as more handsome and more good looking. That's what I just generally feel about perceptions of people over here. I have been fortunate enough not to be commented a lot on that, but I've seen a lot of times people, people actually commenting on other people, especially to do with their heights and their weight and the complexion part, especially the complexion. In the part of world that I come from, I mean, in Pakistan, we have this huge concept of complexion. If you're a dark complexion person, you are somehow not considered too good looking, which is a strange thing, because when you go abroad and when you see people, they just love the tanning, the brown tan, and they appreciate it so much. But in our part, it's the complexion thing. I remember there was this beautician cream called Fair and Lovely, very popular in Pakistan, and it was then somebody put that on the court and sued them that why are they, this is kind of discrimination. And recently they've changed their name to something else, not Fair and Lovely, because the concept of fair is being fair is considered more beautiful. So that's just I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hear you, Santana, that some of these conversations are traumatic. And if it's really, it might be traumatic for many people. Can you see me? Am I also visible? Because
Yes,
see,
visible or
yeah, I'm visible, right? So if it's getting traumatic, I also do well-being workshops. So if it's getting very, very traumatic, it's very difficult. Take a deep breath. I do these grounding techniques. So if you inhale and exhale. So when you inhale, count up till 5, in your head. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you inhale and exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you might feel a little better. But if it's still traumatic for you, I think you might step out for a little bit and then come back. But this inhaling and exhaling, counting till 5, is a grounding technique, and it helps in this conversation. I'm really sorry.
no, can I respond quickly, very quickly?
Yeah, Santana, yeah.
Not me feeling traumatized right now, but what I was referring to is that this question that what people have, commented on your body, and some positives and some negative things.
So I'm not saying that that question is immediately producing a trauma response in me, but just saying that that is, sorry if I've taken it the wrong way, but that is a kind of very personal question, I feel. Like even when someone has given a positive comment on your body, you don't always appreciate it because you don't
Yes.
like people to see for you for your body. And similarly, again goes for a negative comments. So you don't like it, not only because it's a bad comment, but also because why would someone be talking about your body, right? And then talk about my own body in this public forum. I don't know. That may be, I don't know, to me, and I've not been answering your questions, but that is the reason. Like I also have a lot of experiences, but I would rather not speak of those experiences in public because that is something very private to me. So not really a
Yes.
trauma. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Santana. This is definitely, I'm not pushing everyone to talk, but as a feminist, I always feel personal is political and political is personal. And of course, it's very difficult to talk about one's body, especially when we are not used to talking about our body and we've been traumatized to talk about our body. And also we think, and many times we are told that it's a private conversation. And also when we are appreciated also, like, things like when I was young, and now I'm 43, when I was young and someone would say that your eyes are really beautiful, and I say like, "Jhoot bol raha hai." Like you are lying, like, shut up. And I'd never ever take a compliment on my hair. If someone ever tells me that your hair is looking nice, and I say, I never take it as a compliment. And I, maybe because, see, I'm from Assam, and if people know, in Assam, many people have straight hair. And when I was growing up, my relatives told me that I do not belong to the family. And it stayed with me for a long time because everyone in my family have straight hair. And it seems like I do not belong to the entire village also. I'm a second generation learner, and it's like I do not belong to the village also because no one has curly hair in my village. So I never liked the compliment about someone complimenting my hair. I think that therefore I had a love and hate relationship with my hair. But when I started reflecting and doing trauma therapy for myself, and I realized that this is happening because of how my body has been shamed many a times for how it is. I'm also tall, I'm 5'10". And also now with disability, visible and invisible both. So now then with feminism, and then personal is political, private is political. So yes, that's how I've started talking about my body also. So yes, that's why if you feel uncomfortable, of course. But the reason why most of us don't talk about our body is also how we are not asked to talk about our body. We'll talk about the politics of the body later. Anyway, Vibhuti, next slide.
Yeah.
The sexuality part is not just limited to queer and trans people, but we're also going to talk about LGBTQI people and the body image. The first thing that we need to understand that when we talk about LGBTQI plus people, we are not a homogeneous bunch of people. I'm a lesbian woman. I am a second generation learner. I'm an indigenous person. I'm a person with disability. So I'm also not a working class person. I'm a middle class person. When I was a child, I was not a middle class person. Now I'm a middle class person. So it is influenced by caste, class, disability, ethnicity, etc. So for instance, when we think of a perfect body, we actually forget disability a lot. We forget about depression, we forget about psychosocial disability, we forget about physical disability, we forget about the fact that some people are actually quote unquote fat, not because they love being fat. Of course, we have now the fat positive imagery in our social media, but they're fat, quote unquote, because of the amount of medicines that one takes. I take 9 tablets at night because of my bipolar, because I'm bipolar. And also because of also stressors. So this researcher and a psychiatrist called Mayer came up with this model called minority stressors. So what does minority stressor mean? Minority stressor mean that because of all these comments and all, cis heterosexual people have stressors, okay? So I heard about what many people are already talking about, stress because of the comments that people have made, ageist comments, or, you know, comments because of falling hair, or comments because of body and other stuff. But because you are belonging to a certain community, for example, LGBTQIA community, you also have an added stressor because of your gender identity and your sexual orientation. And that added stressor is called minority stressor. And body image and how your body is perceived by other people adds a layer of stresses, and that's how stress and mental health is impacted. Everyone's mental health is impacted. Next. So now, as a lesbian queer woman, how our bodies are looked at? So definitely by the porn industry. So I'm not here to comment on porn is bad or good or anything, but how the porn movies made by men for men and by the capitalist industries look at women having sex with women. You know, how are these porn movies? You will see women with long hair, big boobs, always having sex all the time, wearing stilettos. And this perception of lesbian women, quote unquote lesbian women, are also made the perception about lesbian women that woman will be like this only, will be of certain nature, impacted by movies. So in movies, what kind of lesbian woman do you see? Can anyone say what kind of lesbian woman do you see in movies? Or have you seen any lesbian characters in movies? Yes or no?
Yes.
Vibhuti has seen. So what
Yes.
kind of lesbian character you have seen?
In Netflix and Amazon, I think most of them are highly sexualized, and some of them are shown as extremely aggressive and bullies, and others who are vulnerable. So the
Okay.
same power relations which are there in heterosexual relations are depicted in this thing.
And how do they look like? Short hair, long hair, what kind of clothes do they wear?
So one who is aggressive and domineering has a short hair, and she's generally in a man's attire. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And someone who has long hair.
Very feminine. Yeah, long hair and feminine and wearing high heels and yeah.
Very Santana, you want to say something? Yeah.
No, I just said that of course there is this stereotypical portrayals also that we have all seen, but also there are some very interesting movies that I have watched. One that I can right now remember is I don't remember the name of the film, but it's about Queen Anne from England, and how her, of course, sexuality was not in public domain.
Yeah. Many of these, many of the lesbian women we work with also, Nazaria also work with on crisis intervention. We see that many of the lesbian women are not out. They're either married women, and because marriage is common in our country and you have to get married. So many of the lesbian women are either married off at the age of 14, and they actually escape abusive household after a certain age when they're 18 or 19, and then we help them leave the abusive marital home. and perception of how they look actually. Sometimes sexualized, sometimes they have short hair. So for example, a woman like me, it is good to be invisibilized sometimes, because I might not face that kind of sexualization at times, but I also feel like, why should I be invisibilized all the time? I also want to not to be seen as a cis heterosexual woman, right? Why should I be only visible when I'm in a crowd of queer people, or when I'm with my partner who has short hair? You know, I always feel invisibilized in a crowd if I go to a mall, or if I go to some public places, because of the perception of how a lesbian woman should look like. And in addition to that, I'm fat. I'm really fat. And of course, I look like a quote unquote cis heterosexual woman. And when I wear sari, then definitely I look like a married woman. So yeah, next slide. For transgender persons is different again, because you have dysphoria, right? Dysphoria is distress caused by the factors that you do not identify with the gender you are assigned to at birth, right? When you are not when you do not identify with the gender you are assigned to birth, think about the kind of distress it will bring in to your life, because everything about your body is you do not associate with. The kind of love that I have for my body, maybe it's not associating it with the trans person's life. Not all transgender persons feel the same way. There are gender non-conforming people who might like some parts of the body. There are some some trans people who might not like certain parts of the body. Again, impacted by in media. What kind of messaging does media gives? Think about media, how media has shown trans people in a very, very derogatory way. Of course, there are some good documentaries, some good films. For example, there's this series called Sense8, where there was a very good trans character, played by a trans character again. So it was a good series, because it was made by trans directors. But we have cis actors playing trans roles. So again, like Akshay Kumar playing trans roles. So they project themselves. What do they think of trans people? And trans men are highly invisibilized in the entire spectrum of things. So when we think of trans men, trans people, we only think of trans women, and they're portrayed what we think of trans people as. So again, it is not what trans people think of themselves, it is what we think of trans people as. So yeah, next. So I think one of the things that we need to understand that body image is, and the way body image is, it is political, it is not personal. That how I perceive my body, how I talk about my body, it is political, and it impacts mental health in a big way. That the fact that earlier I used to like my body, now I don't like my body. I can talk about different parts of my body. I can't talk about certain parts of my body. And at an unconscious level also, I do want to fit into a certain aspect, to a certain type of body, even at an unconscious, unintentional level. And that is because we see, even in queer gatherings, or in LGBT gatherings, we see certain kind of bodies only. For example, if look at queer pride, or look at LGBT pride, look at Mr. Gay World, look at RuPaul's Drag Race. There are hardly any fat RuPaul drag queens. Most of the drag queens, there are few drag queens who are fat and they look different, but most of the drag queens in RuPaul Drag Race are also they fit into a very Barbie dollish kind of a image. The next thing is that we need to acknowledge the first thing that before we start talking about body image, first we acknowledge that it is impacting us, that it is impacting the bodies, the image, it is impacting us. And it's not about it is impacting certain outer section of the thing, it is impacting the gender sexuality spectrum. And it does not only impact LGBTQ persons specifically, it impacts everyone's perception of ourselves, our sexuality. And consciously or unconsciously, the bad and the good is created. The Madonna horde is created. For example, the Princess Diaries. So how Anne Hathaway, who had curly hair, was transformed into a queen after she straightened her hair and plucked her eyebrows, and she was made into a princess only after she straightened her hair and looked in a certain way. So you see a woman coming from the other direction, you immediately unconsciously make a perception about that woman or a man or a person, that the person will be of certain nature. So yes, these are the final takeaways from this session. Any questions, comments? Yes, I think I've taken some time, but I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Rituparna Borai-ji. We're truly grateful for
Just call me Rituparna, it's fine.
Yeah.
So sorry. We're really grateful for your valuable time. Your willingness to share your expertise with us has truly broadened our horizons, and your questions put a lot of things in perspective for all of us. Whether we shared it or not, I believe all of us got an idea of it in our mind, and it was something that we were true to, at least ourselves. So thank you so much for your time and wisdom. The floor is now open for questions from the audience. You can raise your hands or type in the Q&A box. Meanwhile, I request our chair for the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel-ji, to add her comments on the session.
Thank you. It is always a very, very educative to listen to you, Rituparna. Always I have learned more and more. My only question is that whatever body image I had, a tremendously low self-esteem as a child, but I sublimated by using my intellect as to and excel in education. And by the time I was 15, I had joined the social movement. After that, it became I became totally oblivious to how I look. So I think the same happens when you are in the company of other people, like your chosen family. I think that been the experience, that empowering experience, and especially the consciousness raising exercises that we had in the women's movement, which played a very important role in shedding whatever prejudices or phobia or fears that we had about ourselves, and then we became more empowered. Has it been experienced in the queer movement also?
I just want to say one thing, Vibhuti, in this case, that sometimes it's been useful, it has been helpful, but I also feel like you have to excel in certain thing or the other. For example, this whole series called Betty.
Yeah.
Betty, there was a Hindi series also, but it's Betty. Ugly Betty. In Ugly Betty, Betty was Jessie Coyne, I know. In Ugly Betty also, Betty was ugly, quote unquote, but she was excelling in something else. So if you are not good looking, look at what happened to Prachi Nigam, the topper.
Yeah.
Because she was a topper, and she was a topper, that she had some hair, and everyone was up to her neck to, some Gillette company or something saying, Bombay Shaving Company saying we'll reduce your hair or something. You have to excel in some place. And what if in the women's movement wanted to dress up and wanted to do makeup? I'm just questioning, and I'm also part of the women's movement, you know that. What if in the women's movement, someone at that point of time, now to their own question, wanted to just make up and dress up and come in flamboyant colors, and did not want to fit into the what women's movement clothes were at that point of time? I'm just asking a critical question.
Yeah,
I think this is something that we need to ask and reflect ourselves on, that maybe queer organizing gives that space to be flamboyant, but queer organizing also doesn't give you a space to sometimes not fit into that flamboyancy. That if you are not flamboyant and you do not fit in, even then women's movement also does not give in the space to be flamboyant enough. And so there's this whole thing of you have to fit in somewhere or the other.
But
So the women's movement did not,
But the queer movement had a humbling impact on women's movement, because that earlier, that stereotypical image of a feminist who is in the rag clothes and who doesn't try to be.
Look at me, I'm part of women's movement. How do I come in meetings? Yeah.
But now you see that even those who are interested in both fashion and feminism, people are not judgmental about her. The younger generation of women, they very much care for how they look, no? But still, we are not judgmental about them, no? The attitude towards one's body has changed. They celebrate their body. That's what I've seen among the younger generation of women who are very conscious of their rights, who call themselves feminists. At the same time, they are in touch with the glamour industry. Means they are seriously observing what is happening in the glamour world, and some of them even adopt those practices, but there is no judgment about that. So it's more democratizing, and I think that may be the contribution of the queer movement, because once you accept diversity and the plural lifestyle among the social movement. Okay. I think there are comments in the chat box. The floor is now.
Sorry, can I ask a question if it's allowed now?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to ask Ms. Rituparna, if I pronounced it properly. As a trainer, when you deal with people, and your topic is it's a very special topic, I must say, because not everyone is trained on to talk on these things. You've done it a very good job. But as a trainer, when you deal with people who have a low self-esteem, mainly because of their body imagery, as this is the topic of the session, is there any tip or any way any suggestions that you give it to them? Because I also train, and a lot of times they're transgender people in there, and usually we have a very stereotyped kind of perception about them, especially to do with the body imagery. So how do we enhance the confidence level of those people? What do you suggest them usually?
I think I'm someone who will take time in. So I take time in training. So it's not a 1 hour session. It takes time. First of all, to build a safe space. Also, I do not. So when I do trainings, it's the onus is not on. See, you can think of. So I remember my supervisor Nivita Menon once telling my I had very low self-esteem. I'm tribal and second generation learner, and I was reading and studying in JNU, and then anyway, my supervisor told, when I started working in the development sector, my supervisor told my boss, who's also a very famous feminist, that what happened to Ritu? Like, she's now so confident and all. So I think it's not just about my confidence. It's also about the support that people receive from the environment and allies and this thing. So I think it's not about my self-confidence and my esteem. It's also about empathy and compassion that we show to people who we think have low self-confidence. Have we ever stepped down from the position of power and asked people to go and make presentations and say that I'm with you, despite the fact that I know you'll make mistakes. Despite the fact that when they say I'll make mistakes, they say that it's okay, you'll make mistakes. No, I stammer a lot. When I was a child, I used to stammer. I'm part of this stammering group also. But this could only go a lot because People would say, it's okay, you stammer. People should have the patience to listen to you.
Correct.
Yeah, so I think we'll have to step down from our privileged position to say that it's okay, let's go together. You talk, don't worry, and you have the right to make mistakes. It's not quote unquote their onus to develop the self-confidence and self-esteem. You know, am I making some sense?
Very much.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
you do definitely. I just want to add one thing over here. Thank you for the answer. I think it's more to, I mean, what I'm getting is like it's more to do with the kind of people you spend time with, your social support, and as they say, like, you know, the diet is not the only food that we eat. It is the people we hang around with, the books that we read, the movies that we watch. So it's a complete lifestyle that we're talking about over here, which means that for someone to get confidence and overcome this complex of having some sort of body imagery or a negative perception among people, I think it's more to do with the kind of people you're spending your time with. So the more social support you get, the more confidence you get as a return. That's what I got it from it. But thank you for the answer.
And you have to push the boundaries a little bit. Kimi, aap kar sakte ho, you can do it.
True, true, very true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the audience member? Shreyaji, I believe you had your hand. Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to share what I think is the problem. I think the body image is formed largely on the basis of your childhood memories and your inflictions that have happened in the initial years. So, a
Absolutely.
woman like Indira Gandhi was led to believe that was super ugly by her bua, who was none other than a very educated accomplished woman, Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit. Yes, so I think that also has a lot to do with what people think about themselves. And I think every comment that we hear, like, I mentioned that I have a lot of pigmentation. This was one of my mommy saying this. What really hurt me was not the pigmentation. That is the last thing that will cross my mind at this juncture. But the thing that, she ignored all the difficulties that I've crossed, I've passed through. I've been through a terrible pregnancy, I had surgery, I lost both my parents one after the other. She knows my journey, but she could not say anything. So I mean, anything bad on this. I mean, she could not really attack me on all these fronts. So she chose to say something about my body. So, or I think a comment on your body part or your body is also basically a lot of um, malice, a lot of it's a way of demoralizing you. It's an instrument to put you down, and it really works. It hits where
It
it
does,
hurts,
it does,
actually.
it does, it does, it does.
Yeah.
It does. Thank you for saying this. It does.
And I have another question, ma'am, a very short question. What Vibhuti ma'am actually said, that was something very similar I believed in. I was going to St. Xavier's College, Ranchi, and I was very, very willing to, I mean, as a student, I joined there for my BA course, and I was very willing to go to DU, but then I belong to a very conservative family. So my father said, and I look like a child. He said that, no, you're not going. You will get spoiled in Delhi, and you're very vulnerable, and all of that. So I stayed back, and I was a rebel in my own way. So I chopped off my hair, and I said that people should notice me only for what I speak and I know, rather than, notice me for my looks. I mean, this stayed for me for quite some time, for not very long, because I found my boyfriend, who ultimately is my husband now, in college. But that is what stood with me. My question is, should we really put back this worth or this respect that we should have for our bodies? Should we put this behind? If we really I mean, should we put this behind and substitute it with some other faculty of ours? Is it a good thing to do?
You know, Shreya, it's nothing good or nothing bad. You know, like, it is not, we just choose our battles sometimes. If I say you did not do right by putting this, who am I to judge you, Shreya? You did what was right for you at that point of time. Everyone has their own battles and everyone fight their battles in their own way. And, I don't like blanket statements made by that also feel like you should be always powerful, you should always be resilient, you should always do this, you should always. There's no what as should. We always choose our battles, and you chose your own battle at that point of time, and that was your battle. I have no one to say what was right or wrong. Maybe I'll choose a different battle, you choose a different battle, and I'm really no one to say that. And I'm glad for what you did. Was work for you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from the audience? Okay, seeing none and looking at the time constraints, we will be concluding this session now. So thank you so much, Rituparna, for taking out the time to answer all the questions in such great detail and with so much patience. Thank you so much. We really look forward to the honor of welcoming you back in our future events.
Thank you so much. I hope I made some sense, and really think about our lives. Our bodies are very, very important. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Rituparna.
Now, I request our chair of the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel-ji, to deliver closing chair remarks.
Yeah,
for
I think today's all three sessions were extremely good because they were interactive. So Raj Mariwala's interactive session focused on grounded experiences of the Mariwala Health Initiative that is working towards community-based mental health work among the most marginalized people facing psychological disabilities, psychosocial disabilities, and also the one learning from the experience of the Mariwala Trust is that there are social determinants, and we should be very, very how to change the environment that creates this kind of mental health challenges is also equally important. So we need to have an institutional approach, and we should deal with the structures and systems that create mental health challenges, which is a very important takeaway. Advocate Rohit Bhatt's presentation and the case studies of the legal battles that we have had over last 20 years showed the transformative change about the queer community do not happen solely inside the courts. The queer movement needs to campaign on the streets, in the elections, in the public platforms for the causes of its people. And we must continue to advocate for horizontal reservation for transgender persons, anti-bullying laws, and replacement of Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019. It also talked about the access to queer affirmative and also affordable and accessible legal services, as well as all other developmental needs, human developmental needs of the queer community. The last one was very interesting. Rituparna has always been very fantastic when it comes to establishing rapport. She has been coming to our organization to discuss with the adolescent girls. Nirantar has played a pivotal role in coming up with so many knowledge resources which are in the public domain, and they have been found extremely useful for the adolescent, young adults, because they are the ones who face major challenges about body image, which is also person's thoughts, feelings, perceptions of the aesthetics, and also sexual attractiveness of their own body, and the concept of body image, which is used in several disciplines, like whether it is neuroscience or psychology or medicine, psychiatry, psychoanalysis, even philosophy, cultural and feminist studies. I think it's very important, and how media constructs, deconstructs, and reconstructs body images has been a sphere of great inquiry among the all age groups in the 21st century, because this age is of selfie, that is of where the social media and the images play very important role. We had never seen politicians caring so much about their body image, but now you have seen so many of them are also getting into this thing, not only in India, all over the world. So I think body image is it's a reality. We just can't say that we can sublimate. In my generation always talked about the sublimation. You sublimate your fears and anxieties about body image by being intellectually endowed or pursuing music or become a good artist or a painter or this. Along with that, for whichever talent you have in 21st century, for the large majority of people, body image is a very important reality, and it is very important to get the realistic understanding and also the various dimensions of it for our own self-preservation. I think what came from Rituparna's thing, that all of us, we need to preserve ourselves and we need to create the space, safe space where, and non-judgmental space so that all of us can flourish. Thank you very much. I found all three sessions extremely rewarding for even personally for me, and I think I'm sure all of you must have had the same responses. Thank you, Rit. Thank you for conducting it so well.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you so much for such a comprehensive overview of today's deliberation. Now we will be concluding our today's session. So as we come to an end of day 3 of Beyond Binaries Cohort 2, an online international summer school program, a 1-month immersive online certificate training course. I, Reetlath, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center. We are grateful to our experts for day 3, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, Mariwala ji, Advocate Rohin Bhatt ji, and Rituparna Borah, for taking out their valuable time and giving an opportunity to the participants who learned from this online certificate program. We thank all our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. Readings for the session have been shared in your email, and a video of the session will also be shared with you for your learning. We look forward to welcoming you for the 4th day of the certificate course on 23rd June 2024 at 4 p.m. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to improve web policy talk and web policy learning. Wishing you a very good evening. Thank you so much.